Okay, folks. Well, good evening. Thank you for joining us at the MRPC Vision Zero Safety Action Plan. Tonight is October 30th. It is the night before Halloween. I hope that everybody helped themselves to some candy before they came in, because the more that you eat now, the less I will take home to Boston with me and eat on Friday night when I shouldn't. To kick us off this evening, I would like to ask Brian Doherty from MRPC to come join us up here at the microphone. He's going to give us some opening remarks, and then we will dive right into this PowerPoint presentation. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate your time. Thanks, Dave. Just remember to speak right into the microphone.
Sure, yep. And thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. We have a better attendance than we did in May when we did this last. I'm Brian Doherty. I'm the Transportation Director at Montezuma Regional Planning. About a year ago, MRPC began its work on a Vision Zero Safety Action Plan with the ultimate aim to significantly reduce or eliminate roadway fatalities and significant injuries by utilizing techniques in design, operation, and management of these road facilities to make improvements towards zero fatalities and significant injuries. Since December, we've been working closely with our project consultant team at WSP International, who's here to present on our findings thus far. And WSP is known as an industry leader when it comes to implementing this type of plan. So we're happy to work with the team at WSP. As for the plan itself, this process will take us into next year. Ultimately, the goal is to bring it before the Montezuma at MPL, the Montezuma Metropolitan Planning Organization, for official endorsement for the region at the September meeting in 2025. What that means when we have a final endorsed plan is that will allow us access to additional federal funding for some of the projects that we identify within the plan. So it's important to remind yourself, this is additional federal investments above and beyond what we typically see in the Montezuma region, and it's geared specifically towards Vision Zero type of projects. So again, reducing fatalities or eliminating fatalities and significant injuries on our roadways. Ultimately, that's the goal, access these funds. However, right now we're still right in the middle of the planning process, but we're really excited about what's next. And with that being said, I'll turn it over to Nate from WSP. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so come on, you. So we just have a few controls to give you first. For those of you looking at this at home on Zoom, I understand we do have some people who are coming in that way. This slide shows you your controls. And it also gives you, should you be having any trouble with the meeting technology during the presentation, there is that number that you can call there. That is the 888-799-9666. There is a webinar ID, which is 926-2199-4061. And apparently I can still read the eye chart pretty well because the laptop is about 5 feet away, so that's good. Just want to let everybody know that we are recording this. If you don't want to be recorded, now would be your time to step off. We're not trying to make anybody internet famous. This is just so that we have a record of what we did. Obviously, the TV station is recording as well. Your microphone and webcam are automatically disabled as you enter. Once we get to the Q&A portion, my colleague, Grant O'Lear, who also works with me in WSP's Communications and Public Involvement group, will be helping to operate the Zoom platform to make sure that both people in the audience and people not in the audience get an adequate shot at asking their questions and answers. This is MRPC's policy on diversity and civil rights. I won't drag you through the whole thing, but I just think that this is, this is one of those important pieces of documentation, just to say that MRPC does not discriminate They operate their programs in compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and they are committed to being non-discriminatory. For anybody looking for more information on that, they have a section of their website that specifically covers Title VI policies and procedures. So you've already heard from Brian this evening. You're hearing from me right now. You'll also be hearing from our project manager, who is on the slide here, Bruce Kaplan. We also have members of our technical team present tonight, Greg Benoit, Han Bao, and then present over Zoom because he has a child with pneumonia, and I wish him all the best with that, Joel Anders. So this is our agenda for this evening. We've covered the introductions. There is Joel on the screen, sir. Thank you. We'll talk a little bit about our process because I think there may be some people with us tonight who are not with us in May. Number 3 is the sort of guts of tonight. Those are the things that we want to present. That's everything that we've been working on since May. There is, as Brian said, about another year of this, but the next steps are going, and the train will start to pick up some speed at this point, which is one of the reasons that tonight is so important. We've been working very hard to get this noticed to the public. We definitely appreciate the efforts of the Fitchburg Sentinel and Enterprise, who told me that they have an email blast database of about 35,000 people. So they sent out a mass email on this. The Gardner News, Neshoba Valley, Vocero Hispano carried our advertising in Spanish. It was in the T&G, the Winchendon Courier. We had several public access cable channels, which have been carrying us since about the 14th of October. We had signal boosting from our partners. So for those of you who might have come to this in May, we went to about, and when I say we, I mean Grant and one of his colleagues went to about 50 different locations all across the MRPC region, ranging from YMCAs to senior centers to public libraries. Each one of those locations that hosted our flyers got a new package of flyers, either by mail or email. The transit agency, MART, is our partner in this effort as well. They have been helping to publicize this. The municipal governments in our 23 member and communities and the 5 MART, what we call the bonus communities, helped to put this out. We have a group called, which Bruce will talk a little bit about, called the Vision Zero Action Committee, or the VZAC. They helped to publicize this, and this time we actually reached out to all the study area school districts so that we could get our notices for this sent home in the lunch boxes or on the app, whichever they use. In the community, we had presence at staff tables, the 4th annual Hispanic Heritage event in Leominster, the Horse Shed event in Lancaster, and then we also had, again, as I mentioned, meeting flyers and project fact sheets distributed in quite a few places. So with that, I would like our project manager, Bruce Kaplan, to come on up. I will remind him because the people at the nice public access cable TV channel told me to do it, to lean into the microphone, and he will give us our process overview. Just lean right in, make it good and loud.
Like this?
That's great.
All righty.
Tilt it up, because I'm a short little guy.
Oh, you're not that short. But anyway, well. So, hi, I'm Bruce Kaplan. I'm the project manager of this, and some of you may recognize me from, well, the photo earlier in the picture, in the presentation, as well as may have seen me on various meetings and such. And just a kind of a brief overview of the program, the Safe Streets for All, or we call it SS4A, which we kind of covered in depth earlier. And what this is, it's a program, a federal program that's funded through the bill, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, or the IIJA, depends on how you want to call it. And its focus is on mitigating serious injuries and eliminating fatalities, specifically on non-highways. This means improving safety on local roads and non-limited access arterials, which is, basically municipal roads, as we say. And again, that's the focus here. It's not on the big highways or those sorts of roads. And it's a 3-phase program. And we're in phase 1 now, which is the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan. And then you kind of shift toward doing some supplemental planning, and then you ultimately culminate with actually implementing these sort of safety countermeasures to that. And there's other sort of benefits, again, in terms of which are key, again, to DOT on this. One is that we do know that, as it says there, disadvantaged communities are overrepresented. And by that, we're kind of talking about, we need you to suspend your idea of what you think a disadvantaged community is. It's not just low income. It's not just a minority community. We'll get to this later when we talk about equity, but it includes things and categories like veterans, like people with health issues, seniors, youths. These are vulnerable users. These are people also who, primarily rely on walking and biking as their mode of transportation or transit. And they bear the brunt of a lot of these. They're highly overrepresented in a lot of these fatalities. Additionally, again, the U.S. DOT wants to improve multimodalism. So there's, again, as we say, trying to solve this kind of lack of adequate bike and ped facilities, as well as, looking for solutions to climate change and to mitigate the kind of effects of climate change by decreasing vehicle miles traveled and, discretionary auto trips, shall we say, and how do we move people to walk more but again, the important thing here is, that we come together with this. And the important thing here actually is that graphic on the right. You see it goes all the way down. That's what the goal is here, to eliminate fatalities. And what we're kind of, moving towards at this moment is kind of between kind of 1 and 2 sort of. If you're kind of looking down that, what we're looking to ascertain where are the problems today, based on crash data, based on the information we have, and we develop some tools, and where do we think they're going to happen in the future? What are the conditions that all come together based on the current sort of our current data? We kind of do a little future modeling of like, okay, we know that, this factor and this other factor and the third factor all come together, and for whatever reason, there are more accidents that happen there. Are there other places that, may also suffer from this sort of thing in the future, even if they're currently not? How do we head that off, shall we say? How do we protect people and make them safer? But it's also about, again, implementing and monitoring. How do we set this up to succeed? How do we set realistic goals? It may not be realistic, despite what we have there, to say, okay, we want to eliminate all fatalities in 20 years, maybe 30 years, maybe 25 years. Maybe we need to do something a little more incrementally. It's, again, about setting these goals and figuring out a way to implement them and to monitor them and make sure it happens, and to improve safety. And this is kind of one of Nate's favorite sort of graphics. It's kind of a four-legged stool, shall we say. First, the people running, the people kind of running this, MART and MRPC, they're the ones who got the federal grant for this. They're the ones who ultimately are going to own this safety action plan when we finish it. They're managing us. The VSAC is kind of a project steering committee. It's composed of a whole bunch of different people, representatives from municipalities, but also from other sort of entities. We have a representative from Devon's that sits on there. We have district people sitting on there. We have first responders. We have people from China 9 who are sitting on that to deal with health mobility sort of issues around the area. And they're kind of, help us to prep for it. We're number 3 there. We are the technical experts on this. We've done this around the country. We help prepare the needed documentation so that MRPC and its constituent municipalities in the future can try to access some more of that federal money and the federal funds to make these improvements. And then there's you. both here in the in the room as well as out there, the public. You're the reality check on this, like whether we missed anything. You know, we look at the data, we stare at the data, we do our analysis, we run our models, but you live out here, you know where these kind of problem sort of points are, and really the kind of, you know, some of the hot button areas and the hot button geographies of where certain things happen, and we're looking to hear from you on that, to hear, okay, because again, we, as much as we try, we may not catch everything, you know, in all our analyses. We sit and we look, and someone says, oh, well, you know, actually that's that factor over there, you know, and go, oh, okay. We circle that and add that to our list. So yeah, this is a brief kind of synopsis of how we got there. I know Brian sort of talked about this. We've been working with MRPC since the beginning of the year. We, you know, had a, you know, again, we kicked it off. We composed the VSAC committee, the steering committee, and we began to, you know, move forward with that. We began to collect some data. We had our first public meeting at the end of May, and we've been kind of crunching numbers and working with the good folks at MRPC and MART to kind of figure things out. Some of these key sort of tools that my colleagues will soon talk about, the high injury network, the high risk network, and yeah. And tonight, you know, we're sharing this with you. We're kind of getting your input, and kind of, you know, I would kind of say buy-in on this, to say like, okay, is this right? Is this where we want to go? Because as Nate has a spiel that I'm sure we'll say, like, this is, you know, as we're here, not the beginning of the end, but the end of the beginning, right? We're looking at the end of tonight and in the near future kind of to move on, that like, okay, we've got the tools we need to begin targeting some areas, but we need you to weigh in on them. We need the public to weigh in. Did we miss something? Are there other factors that we didn't really capture? So we really do need input from the public on this, because, like I said, we can stare at data and look at it and, you know, look around. But if there are other sorts of things, we need to, you know, have you. We're kind of basically, here are the tools that we are going to use ultimately to prioritize projects, because we know there's a finite sort of source of money out there, you know, and to come up with, you know, requisite sort of, you know, projects and, you know, plans for implementing them. And these are the tools that we're proposing to base them on. So I'm going to now move to my colleague, Greg Benoit, who's going to talk about some of the crash stuff.
Forgive me, my eyesight isn't quite as good, so I'm going to bring mine.
Well, neither is mine, but I squint a lot, but go ahead.
All right. Hi, everyone. Greg Benoit. I'm a transportation planner with WSP. So let me raise this up a little bit here. So the first step, we started with a...
I just realized I can kind of do this from here now. I realized I handed off too early to you, because first we got 2 lit review slides, but you can stand there because Perfect. I can just do that. My apologies to everyone. So, you know, again, we've kind of done this a lot. We've done... Vision Zero studies all over the world. You know, specifically, this is you know, it seems to lost track of how many we've done in New England at this stage. So we've looked at safety plans that our colleagues have done around the country. As you can see there's 6, as well as kind of what's going on here in our MRPC. And those are kind of the things we had focused on. We're kind of trying to find what's the best common elements within the methodology that we are devising to prioritize projects and to pick projects and to make decisions, and, you know, as well as finding good other sort of insight onto what's the best way to you know, constitute an equity analysis and make something equitable across a geography which is very diverse and has different sorts of people. We know that, you know, this geography, you know, we're currently in an urban area here in Fitchburg. That's where we're coming to you from. We know there are some very rural areas that look nothing like this, and people have different sorts of ideas and different concerns. And how do we address those equitably? So next slide. You can pop through. Yeah, so again, we reviews that. And we came up with a way of kind of aligning it best with kind of the peers. As I said, you know, we kind of went through those, and we're really going to engage you now, but we really think we're going to need you when we figure out what constitutes success to the plan. You know, we always want to shoot for, okay, let's eliminate all fatalities and all serious injuries, but in terms of, you know, specific sorts of goals, short-term goals, and how we achieve that, and what does it look like when we achieve that short-term goal? Because we need to kind of come to consensus on that. So ultimately, we'll get there. But again, these are the sorts of things that, you know, by reviewing these other plans, that all these other plans said, you know what, these are really important. This is what you need to hone in on. So, and now I will turn it back officially to Greg. Sorry again for popping through. See, Nate, I told you that divider slide was going to trip me up a little bit. So.
Yep, no worries. Keeping us on our toes here. All right. So as we moved away from kind of the academic overview of what we were looking at and kind of our best case or best practices, we moved into a detailed crash analysis of the available data. So all of the data for this, the crash analysis came from Impact, MassDOT's Impact portal. So you're going to see various variations of this map kind of moving forward, but this is the base of all of that work, kind of for the high injury network and high risk network. So the first thing we did is kind of map the geospatial distribution of fatal and serious crashes over a 5-year period, kind of seeing where in the MRPC region those crashes are occurring. And then prior to the kind of in-depth analysis, we did a kind of a historic look back just to kind of get a feel for historically what the numbers are, kind of seeing where the peaks and lows are in terms of crashes. So we looked back 10 years, back through 2014. So we looked at 2014 through 2023 data. And then as you will see, actually, I'm going to flip back very quickly, just in terms of our kind of crash universe. You'll notice that there are no crashes on any of the interstate highways or limited access highways in the region, just because there are kind of limited countermeasures that we have the ability to implement that'll kind of provide value for all roadway users. So that's why you won't see throughout the presentation anything about interstates or limited access highways. Sorry for jumping back. So we did see over the 10-year period on those non-interstate and limited access highways was a total of 944 KSI. So what KSI stands for anyone not familiar, fatal is the K, serious injury is the SI, so we're referring to only fatal and serious injury crashes for this crash analysis. So there are 944 over that 10-year period. And then another acronym you'll see very frequently throughout the presentation is VRUs, which stands for Vulnerable Road Users. And we do kind of split them out, you'll see on the next slide, into motorized and non-motorized VRUs. So non-motorized, we're referring to pedestrians and bicyclists, individuals in wheelchairs, anyone using a non-motorized kind of transportation device. And then a motorized VRU, we categorize anyone on a motorcycle or a moped who are kind of at a higher risk than someone in an enclosed vehicle. So also what those kind of designations stand for moving forward. So in terms of that, we did see approximately 1/3 of all KSI crashes included a VRU, whether it be motorized or non-motorized. And that kind of proportion is similar for fatal crashes. So of the 119 fatal crashes in that 10-year period, 1/3 of those also involved a VRU individual. And then just in terms of overall injury crashes in the region, we did determine that approximately 9% to 10% of all injury crashes over that 10-year period were fatal or serious injury crashes, so a significant percentage throughout the region. Moving forward here. So from that 10-year period, we dove more into the more recent 5-year analysis period, which is kind of the bulk and the basis of all the mapping and the networks moving forward. So in that 5-year period, there was a total of 471 KSI crashes, and we kind of have the breakdown on the slide here by year and also by VRU or by mode share. So the largest, the kind of the light blue on the slide here, that is passenger vehicle only crashes. The light blue is non-motorized VRUs, and then the darker blue is the motorized VRUs. So of those 471 KSI crashes, 53 were fatal and 418 were serious injuries. And then kind of breaking it down a little bit further by mode, of those crashes, 305 only involved a motorized vehicle, so a collision between one or two or more vehicles or a single vehicle crash. 68 of the KSI crashes involved a non-motorized VRU, and then 100 involved a motorized VRU, such as a motorcycle or moped. And the reason you see those asterisks up there is there was 2 cases, and then that's why the numbers kind of don't add quite up. There were 2 crashes that involved both a non-motorized and motorized VRUs, so we wanted to make sure we counted both of those categories, but didn't want to double count them in the overall network. And then, so we did do a pretty robust crash data analysis, and we're in the final report. We'll have all sorts of kind of tables and figures and whatnot, but for this presentation, we wanted to kind of get into the bulk, which is the high injury network and high risk networks that Han and Joel will be talking about a little bit later. But for now, we just wanted to provide a couple key takeaways we did find regarding the unique characteristics of the KSI crashes in this region in particular, because they are different in every region we look at. So we wanted to make sure we were highlighting those unique characteristics for this region. So we noted that the peak for the 5-year period occurred in 2022 as we were kind of coming out of the COVID lockdown and pandemic. So the most KSI crashes occurred in that year, peaking at 120, as more people were kind of out and about, active on the streets, which is expected. And so that peak occurred, and we were kind of seeing it kind of rising upwards coming out of COVID, as we've seen elsewhere as well. And then just so we're not equating a crash to just one individual, we did want to note that KSI crashes can and most frequently do involve one or two or more individuals. So of those 471 crashes, there were a total of 57 fatalities, individuals, and 469 serious injuries. Just so we're noting that they can and do often involve more than one fatality or serious injury. Some other key takeaways we found were in the region, approximately 12% of all KSI crashes involve some sort of drug or alcohol use, and those cases were most frequent in the 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. Time frame, which is kind of as you'd expect for those sorts of cases. And then 10% of KSI crashes involved a distracted driver, and we found most frequently, I think 70% of those 10% involved a mobile device. And one note we did want to note moving forward, and we referenced in the report, often the distracted KSI crashes are frequently underreported. They often rely on kind of self-reporting, so the police who are taking the reports don't see the crash happen, so they kind of rely on individuals involved to kind of self-report or to know that someone else was on a mobile device. So these numbers are frequently less than we would expect. So just a note we had moving forward. And then in terms of built environment, which kind of directly relates to the high injury network that Han's going to present next, 60% of all KSI crashes occurred on roadway corridors and 40% occurred at intersections or near intersections or intersection related. Yes, over half of these crashes are occurring not at or related to an intersection. And most of those crashes occur on undivided two-way highways where there are opportunities for cars traveling in opposite directions to kind of impact and collide with one another. So they're a little more frequent that we found than kind of divided highways in the region. And then of those 40% of intersection crashes, as one would expect, most of those did occur at stop-controlled or uncontrolled intersections. Again, kind of allowing more opportunities for potential conflict points, whether it be between vehicles or pedestrians and bicyclists kind of maneuvering that intersection. And moving forward into kind of the manner of these collisions, while VRU crashes and pedestrian and non-motorized VRU crashes were a significant proportion, the majority of KSI events were between 2 or more vehicles. I think it was approximately to 2/3 or so. Don't quote me on that. There will be more detailed percentages in the report, but the most common were between crashes or between vehicles. And then for the cases where there was only a single vehicle involved, that means not a crash between two or more motor vehicles or a pedestrian or bicyclist. The most frequent, I'm going to backtrack that, between two vehicles, the most frequent crash types were crashes with a tree, a fixed object such as a hydrant or a guardrail, or crashes between pedestrians, which were, as you saw previously, were significant components. So all of that saying, these are key takeaways, kind of what are the types of crashes happening in the region, and where are they happening. And the where are they happening is the basis and the foundation of what Han worked on and will present next. So that is the high injury network. The high injury network she'll get a little bit more into detail, but it's kind of a retroactive look at where these crashes have occurred and where are the locations, the geographic locations of where these crashes are occurring. So Han, I'll pass it over to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg, for sharing with us all the discoveries with the crash data analysis. Our next step is try to go from the crash data to actual projects, meaning we try to link this data or incidents to corridors or intersections where we can actually take actions and make change. So there are several steps in our data modeling, and the first step is the high injury network. So what is high injury network? It's a tool built based on 5-year crash history. It will show you several different layers of the network, showing where the high frequency and density of the crash happens, aka where the most dangerous road based on those based on the 5-year history data. And to do that, first we build a weighting system. That is to make it quantifiable. Like when you have like one fatal crash, it's very significant, and everyone see it in the news. But when you have like several minor injuries, that also count for something, and there must be something that we can do to try to reduce those kind of crashes. So we have a weighting system that's based on injury severity of those crashes. We have the ceiling weight of 21 for fatal injury crashes. For serious injury crashes, we have a weight of 10, and then 2 for minor injury and 1 for possible injury. And then we are giving 0 for property-only crashes. And then we link all the crashes to where they happened. That is the segment of the roadway or the intersections. After that, to recognize that sometimes the segment right next to those crash locations also kind of contribute to why those crashes are there. So we have a rolling average of 6 neighbor segments of that main segment, each segment, and then normalize them by the length of each segment. Then we have 2 ways to show them actually in the map. This is the town level data. So it's showing where this model is showing the most dangerous roadway networks in each town. You can see there's high. Well, the 4 layers are by 2.5%, 5%, and 7.5%, and top 10% of roadway mileage in each town. And you can see the darker colors are showing the more dangerous roadway segments, and they are mostly on like major connectors or like in town centers where you have higher volume and you have notably a history of crashes there. And then to check whether we actually showed where the crash happened. Here is the statistic of each category of the high injury network and the coverage of each level of the crashes. We can see the top 10% of the high injury network, which is our entire network, covers 2/3 of all different type of injuries, 100% of all fatal, almost all of the serious injury crashes. The top 5 already covers all the fatal injuries and more than 2/3 of the serious crashes. So I would say that's a pretty good represent of the past 5 years history. This is a regional version of the high injury corridor. The data underneath it is the same as the town level map you just see, but this one shows you a better connectivity because it's ranked by the whole region, not each town. This gives us some reference when we try to rank, like later when we have actual projects, we can tell like how this corridor is ranked in this town or how this corridor is ranked in the whole region. And then there's the high injury intersections. All the 2 previous maps are showing the corridor results. For the intersections, it's the same data processing process. It's same weighting system, but now the crashes are divided into 2 sets. One is the corridor-related crashes and the injury-related crashes. So for the injury version, for the intersection version, you get we relate all the crashes that happens to each intersection with that weighting system, and now you see where the most dangerous or the highest risk happened in the past 5 years, and we see a quite similar pattern as to the regional high injury network. We see the concentration in Fitchburg and Leominster and other couple of major town centers. And here's another coverage check for the intersections. The top 100% covers 1/3 of all different type of injuries, but the top 50 already covers 100% of all fatal and 1/3 of the serious injured crashes. But you see a much higher coverage in the Fitchburg Leominster area and slightly lower coverage in other towns. And with that, I will pass over to Joe to talk about our next step in the data modeling, which we focus on trying to define the high-risk networks for like future possibilities.
I think I'm advancing Joel's slides. What do you think?
Thanks for the handoff, Han. It's very well done there. Apologies for everybody in the real room. I would like to be there, but sometimes you gotta protect what's closest, so to speak. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to come through. I'd say that was kind of the first half of the network equation. As Han said, very location focused. I'm here to talk about the systemic analysis and then what comes after that, the high risk network. You see a graph here, more or less the systemic analysis as an attempt at doing a very abstract approach to the geographical approach and the high injury network. Instead of looking specifically where a crash occurred and clustering them in some sort of hotspot methodology, we're instead scanning, kind of almost closing our eyes at a geographic level and saying, instead of where are you, what else might be at play? How many lanes are there? What type of area are you in? What is the volume of traffic? Are there turns, et cetera, et cetera? When you go through this kind of effort, you create this abstraction called the typical regional roadway, right? It doesn't exist in reality, but if we put it through a large model, there would be a typical roadway for each of these elements. And what you'll see is kind of looking at a factor of, with that element, be it number of lanes, speed, equity area, et cetera, in play, what do we see as a factor? And that's typically something less than a calibrated index of 1. And then when it's turned on, so to speak, at the network level, what do we see? And it's usually framed as something greater than 1. As you read these factors, anything greater than 1 can almost be thought of as a percentage increase or a multiplier, right? If you see something that's 2, then that's a doubling. We've calculated these for a number of elements. We'll go through just a few of them, but really the main takeaway here is we're doing the conceptual basis to the predictive high-risk network, and that'll come in just a few slides. Moving right along, we see the first result on the systemic side for equity area. I believe this was presented perhaps on the first go-around, but we'll go ahead and discuss it. We are looking at block-level census data, looking at the prevalence within the region itself in a given block group of youth, seniors, low-income households, those with access to zero vehicles, those who do not identify solely as white alone, those with limited English proficiency, disabilities. Those are, somewhat relatively common characteristics that we have either covered in previous studies or are very common environmental justice characteristics that otherwise exist at the state level. We dug a little deeper here in this assessment, going with what you see here in the asterisks. We looked at potential public health outcomes based on historical data at the tract level, as well as the prevalence of veterans among us, if you will, and then in addition, the housing of refugees as a means to otherwise support populations that are very vulnerable. In this stacked bar graph, you see some things below a given dotted line. That given dotted line is that theoretical value of 1. In the middle, you see an area that we simply term as equity area. This is a census tract that, based on the 10 factors above, scored within the top 35 or 40% of the region. And then what you see further off to the right are those tracts that scored within the top 20% of the region, making the point of the higher the prevalence among these factors, typically the higher incidence of fatal and serious injury crashes. I know sometimes the text is a little bit small for those who may need to be squinting in the room, as I heard earlier. What we see for kind of the run-of-the-mill equity area, so to speak, that top 35 or 40 is an index of 1.2, so roughly a 20% increase beyond what we would typically see in any other region. And then on the actual top 20%, we're seeing a factor of around 86%, I believe, as the multiplier there. So again, just trying to typify what we did. This will all be available in a very extensive piece of the report, but we have also seen the need to not belabor it too much, given its highly technical nature. With that, I'll go ahead and move to the next one. We are looking at the overlay of that equity designation with something that Han talked about previously, the high entry network, again trying to form the basis for how we will flesh on a bunch of different variables within this high-risk network. As you read this table to the left, you see kind of the ranking within the high entry network, the top 1%, the top 2.5%, et cetera, the report out of the overall, proportion of crashes and their types that were consumed by that. And then in the two to the right further, you see equity. That last one is framed as basically what's the proportion of mileage within a given tranche of the high entry network that falls in the equity. So that first line, this is top 1%. And then the row that says high, 23%. That means out of 100% of those miles and that top 1%, 23% of them fall in an equity area. And to again make the basis or kind of the calibrating point, right? You go down to that bottom row that says all, and you see at a regional level across all of these equity areas that we've defined, the mileage should only really be showing about 16%. So again, really getting to that point of a systematic influence or thumb on the scale for variables that often aren't under anybody's direct control, so to speak. Moving to the next one. This is a quick rundown of more or less all the variables we assessed and doing these indexes, just to give you a flavor for what we did ahead of going into what we'll actually use. So area type, this is what you think of if you're a true kind of planning nerd. The census basically has a bunch of definitions for urban, a transitional urban area, a rural area, etc. So we looked at that. Run-of-the-mill federal roadway classifications, arterials, collectors, etc. Overall roadway widths as proxied by lane count, average daily traffic as provided by MassDOT, speed limit posted as provided by MassDOT, private truck route, etc. What we ultimately came out with will be available 2 more slides from now. teeing that up, we are going to the high-risk network. If you want to advance the slide, that'd be much appreciated. What you see here on the right may look somewhat similar to some things that you've seen previously, but I promise you it is the result that we saw for your neighbors across the yard, so to speak, and Greater Lowell. I've actually looked at these back and forth, and there are some interesting observations that we will go to in a few. More or less, you've seen a counterpoint to this that Han presented earlier that bolded a few different words within the high-entry network. Most of those words were related to geographic, based, or historical. Well, the HRN definitely pulls in the historical data, right? The same crashes, it's not so concerned about where it is. Again, the nature of what we're doing here is more on the mid or the long-term side, whereas you can formulate an investment plan in the near and midterm, often around the high-entry network. Typically, the worst of the worst facilities in terms of how much investment it will take, how much time it would actually take to program, design, et cetera, something to affect change in an environment like that. These often kind of persist within the high-risk network, right? So the idea is that it's supposed to be predictive. It's supposed to provide a bit of coverage beyond the high entry that you've already seen, right, where we've already seen the crashes accumulate over 5 years, to really dial out and see, okay, if you needed to go broader and really get to the goal of zero, a decade, 2 decades from now, what are you really going to need to bite off? So sometimes you might not necessarily like the lines you see in the high-risk network, but they're the lines you got to deal with to make some real change. And with that, we can go ahead and roll over to the scoring table. After looking at what we saw on the various analyses presented before, this is what we came out with. We have the factor that we're weighting on the left, so average daily traffic, number of lanes, speed limit, equity area, that urban-rural edge, urban-rural kind of designation, as well as the prevalence of walking and biking trips among all trips. As you go to the third column, I'm trying to denote more or less which of the things might you affect, right? If you altered or otherwise took this into account, how might the crashes that you're seeing be impacted if it were improved? And so sometimes it says rate and severity for areas where it makes some degree of sense to assume that both would change. Sometimes it just says rate, right? Sometimes it says severity, particularly the one at the bottom, right? To note the fact that if you're seeing higher rates of people outside of vehicles walking and biking, then when a crash occurs in such an environment, is more likely to potentially cause a severe degree of injury. With that, some of these are rated as 2. This is a combination of some literature review things we've done, studies from elsewhere, as well as the direct results for your region specifically. I will admit, the 6th one there is a new one, at least for our team here, but not necessarily for the firm. I'm relatively proud that we pulled it off, and I'm happy to present you the results on the next slide. So we have the regional network map for the high risk, which I myself could zoom it in, but it does come across pretty well here. I think we see a strong confluence, so to speak, almost a steady stream of parallel ladders, if you will, between downtown Fitchburg and downtown Leominster, but you also see kind of interjurisdictional coverage, my favorite thing in the world, right? Sprawling from Air through Shirley out to Lunenburg, but also kind of moving from the center of Gardner out up to Winchendon, and also along the general corridor between those municipalities out west. Not trying to give away the whole bag, but kind of looking ahead. What we'll aim to do is more or less fuse both these networks together, such that each community on here gets a little bit of something, and then really put a finer point to what that something is in the coming months. With that, we'll go ahead and roll over to the final slide, at least under my belt. It is a similar table reporting the relative share of fatal and serious injury crashes based on the overall evaluation score in the high-risk network, right? So an absolute score of 10 clearly didn't happen that often. It isn't all that surprising, but at least a score of 9, right, did occur a little bit, started to accumulate. On the previous graph you saw there, we were labeling anything as 8, 9, or 10 as that kind of highest risk and dark red color. That comes out to roughly about 15, maybe 10%, depending on which bucket you're looking at. As we go down the rungs, we move to 25, into about 40, and then into 5, really at about 60. So again, it's all a matter of how far you want to dial this out. Obviously, you could make a map that covered everything, right? But really, it's about finding that perfect window or balance wherein you can actually go forward and make an investment plan that somebody's going to look at it, from both a price tag level and a programmatic time level, not simply start laughing at. So, you cast the net wide, but you also have to be a bit reasonable about it as well. So, just wanted to elucidate some of those thoughts. With that, I will turn it on back over to Bruce to talk about next steps.
And we're very close to the end. I saw a few people trying to raise hands. We've got like 4 more slides. All right, if you're dying to go, ma'am, go right ahead.
Yeah, I am, but while he's still on, if we could go back a few slides to the one that had the red dots around certain communities. It had like a red dot around Ayer, and yeah, that one.
Sure.
So it looks to me like, even though in one of the other slides that over 50% of the crashes were in Fitchburg and Leominster, that you're focusing in on Westminster and Ayer, and is that because they have migrant motels there? What is the reason for that?
No, there's a couple things going on with this graph. So, so if you notice back up here, sorry, I didn't want to zap you with this. So there's a list of, these are the equity factors, right? So youth, seniors, poverty, carless households, race, non-white alone, limited English proficiency, people with disabilities. All of those are factors that are considered in every single one of these equity analyses, wherever it's done across the United States. One of the things that we do here at WSP is we try to personalize each one of these studies for the set of communities in which we're doing it. And so as a result, we worked with the leadership of MRPC and then our VZAC, which is that Vision Zero Action Committee. And the 3 factors here that we could find are these public health factors. So that's things like prevalence of asthma, prevalence of diabetes, prevalence of veterans, and then, as you say, refugees, locations where they have migrant, communities. So the reason that you have those areas of focus where we have these purple circles is just to tell you where those factors that are unique to your region, basically, that the VZAC, which is sort of community representatives, and the leadership of the MPO and the transit organization felt these are some additional factors where we'd like to look. One of the things that we showed to, before we come out to the public, we tend to show things to both the leadership and the Vision Zero Action Committee. We showed them this map when we ran it with just the standard factors, so kind of everything above where the laser pointer is. And then we showed it to them with everything with the additional 3 factors baked in. And while there are some changes, they're subtle. You'd have to really look at them for a while. So we do want to give credit to those 3 factors because they are unique to you folks, and they're about personalizing it to your region. That's one of the things we saw in the literature review. These things should not be a cookie cutter. But those other 3 factors, the health factors, the veteran status, and the presence of a facility serving migrants, it doesn't make a huge amount of difference. That help?
I hear what you're saying.
Okay, great.
Is the prison, the federal and state prisons, are those factored into that as well? But I think those are in those blocks, like the one in the Gardner prison, looks like maybe the Westminster Circle, and the Shirley prison in the Devons.
Yeah, I don't think we particularly took into account imprisoned populations. That's not necessarily one of the census factors that we would have looked at. Just again, because these are the normal factors. I suppose if, depending on how they calculate those things, not being a census guru, I suppose if you were a senior citizen in prison, they might pick that up if there's a, I know we have an aging prison population. But again, those are the factors that we used. It's not related so much to I know the prisons are there, but it's not so much related to that, because in theory, if you're in prison, you shouldn't be out exposed on the roadway, right? So that stands to reason. But so since we stopped for questions, sir, we've got like 4 slides, but you were so patient earlier. What can we do for you?
My question has to do what were your data sources for the equity factors? I presume that they American Community Survey?
Yes, there was census data. So, and I'm going to look at Joel and Han, and they're welcome to grab me by the necktie and tell me I'm wrong. But we used Census 2020, American Community Survey that was newer, and then where we were looking for a refugee facility, we specifically spoke to the town in which it was resident. Did I get that right, folks? Yeah, I'm getting a nod. There we go. Grant, do we have anybody on Zoom, just since we took a quick break here?
We do, but there are no questions so far and no hand raised.
Okay, all right. So I think just because we have a few more, we'll let Bruce wrap it up, because we got a few more. It's like 4 more. I know it's a lot to inhale data-wise all at once, but what?
We got like 2 more.
Yeah, so it's not that much. So I think we just fire away through this, and then we have been joined here by Her Honor the Mayor of Fitchburg, and I did promise her in the MassDOT tradition that I came up in that she would have an opportunity to speak. So when we get to this, if she would like to make a statement or offer any thoughts or comments, I'll clear the floor for her, and then we'll have any other Q&A that we need. Bruce, take it away.
All right. So again, kind of the what does this all mean, that all we've been doing, that my colleagues and myself have been doing? What does this mean? Basically, we've got these result in 2 very useful tools, but they're not completely exclusive and exhaustive. The HIN, the High Injury Network, lets us know where the problems are and how intense they are. And the High Risk Network is predictive. It lets us know where the problem's going to be in the future. So those help us to visualize, where we think the problem areas are, and we can begin the next sort of moving towards where are we going to target the investment in terms of geography, what appropriate countermeasures, could help, as well as, we're going to make sure, of course, when we come up with a countermeasure, to tailor it to you guys. We know, again, it's not a one-size-fits-all by any stretch of the imagination. We need to come up with measures that are, tailored to the community, but not just the community, but the communities within the community, right? Something that's happening here in Fitchburg or Leominster, putting in something there. If that's not going to solve the problem out in Winchendon, shall we say. So we have to be very context sensitive about all this. And we're going to talk about how we're going to prioritize, which is going to lead us to where we're going. From now until plan adoption, hopefully, in a little under a year. As you can see, looking there, as Brian said, out in the bold, we've got the MPO meeting voting to adopt. But between now and then, we're going to be on immediately up till the next couple months. We're going to be coming up with prioritization methodology and kind of coming up with a prioritization network. We're going to begin conferring again with our partners. We're going to have a VSAC meeting in February to confirm this sort of thing. We're going to begin to develop some projects and some countermeasures, and as well as some policies and performance measures. We're going to continue to refine them. We're going to have another VSAC in the spring, March and May. We're going to have a public meeting to present these sort of results and get some initial feedback. We're going to begin then moving to, the report. We're going to have, over the summer, another VSAC meeting to kind of confirm this. Then we're going to have a public meeting to kind of present our draft plan, and then we're going to, do that with enough time for the have adequate public comment, the required 21-day period. And then hopefully we're going to have a vote, and we're going to adopt this thing, and we're going to get moving on this. And we're going to, all the time, even though it just says there in September, we're going to kind of be giving assistance to not just MRPC and MART about, like, okay, how do you go next with this? What are the next sort of steps you take in terms of acquiring federal funding, but also with the various component municipalities? How do we work that? Because ultimately, a lot of the implementation stuff is done on the municipal level as opposed to on the regional level, because MRPC doesn't actually own any of the roads, right? It's the municipalities that own the roads. So how do we position the municipalities to take that next step, in line with what we're coming up with in this regional safety action plan, and to take those next forwards? And we know that this program, it's only out there for another 2 years. It sunsets in 2026. So we want to be able to give adequate time for municipalities and for MRPC to take these next steps and to try to get that available funding to make things safer. And with that, I guess we turn it over to questions and the mayor, probably. Oh, here's the mayor.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for coming to Fitchburg to show this off. I know my Deputy Chief of Staff, Miles Phillips Wilcox, involved in the VZAC committee, and I believe Amanda Keck, our Senior Center Director. So thank you for having them serve on this committee for this important grant. So having this federal grant opportunity is really good. What the specifics are for Fitchburg, I'm really interested in, but as a general overview, thank you so much for presenting this.
Yeah, I can share my Fitchburg story. My grandmother was born at 145 Myrtle Avenue and drove the MRPC region in the Great Depression in a Model T teaching art to students. So her name is the password for the special email account that we maintain for this. Married name, not maiden name. But I feel very much protective of this project and want to make sure that it does well. We have very strong partners in the leadership of MRPC and MART. They've been great to work with. I think, as to your point, to the conversation we were having earlier, and I'm so happy that you're here. The reason that we wanted to share this with you, it is a bit of abstraction. It is a bit hard for folks to follow. But these networks that we showed you tonight, these are the things on which we will begin saying, okay, if there's, to use the phrase that Joel used earlier, if a lot of crashes have accrued in this location and we can project more crashes accruing in this location that mirrors it, we have when Bruce used the term countermeasures. Well, what's a countermeasure? Does that mean that we should signalize an unsignalized intersection? Does that mean that we need to reduce a speed limit? Does that mean that we need to, New Englanders love these roads that come together like, this. Do we need to do what we call in the transportation profession, tee that up? Right? Do we take one road and keep it straight and bring the other road and put a bend in it so that it comes in straight and the drivers can see each other? Those are the countermeasures. So that's what we're going to go away now and begin to develop. But so that we can do that with confidence, we wanted to show you all that. So we really appreciate everybody who made an appearance here tonight, either in the audience or on screen. I'll take a moment. Grant, do we have any questions from Zoom?
None now, and I just invited anybody to type them into the chat if they have it.
You're the man. Please, sir, go ahead. Or go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, I'm Jacqueline Wetchy. I reside in Fitchburg, and I'm here to ask you to pave Canton Street. It has public housing on it, including for disabled people who can't easily navigate the bumpy road in wheelchairs. It has additional public housing on adjacent streets, Winooski and Meadowbrook. Poor people are less likely to have cars, and as pedestrians, they could be hit by drivers veering out of their lane to avoid potholes. It's a primary access road to Johnson State Pool, the one free pool in the city, and the one that is consistently open and thus an attraction for children in particular. Really paving any street would be beneficial. I picked Canton, not because I live on it, but because I do drive on it. I see the issues with it, and because it's not already on the list of streets that the city is planning to pave. I would ask that you stand up to anyone who would try to divert money away from paving to less essential projects. Paving is the #1 priority of most Fitchburg residents who are your constituents. However, if you are dead set against paving, or if you don't feel this is a priority, then I have a backup plan, which is some sidewalk work to propose. I would propose that you repair and construct the sidewalk along John Fitch Highway, starting in front of the former Unitil building, then going along the side of the St. Bernard's athletic fields toward the corner with Summer Street. In places there is no sidewalk, in others it is badly crumbled, yet other places are so overgrown with brush as to be impassable. So people heading to Market Basket, which provides an essential service, food, must walk in the road, and John Fitch Highway is a busy road. And I did write this out for you as well.
Ma'am, I think you must have participated in our survey back in the spring, because we heard those. I read all the comments that were on the 240-odd surveys that we got, and I seem to recall comments to those effects. So thank you very much for reinforcing that, and I'm more than happy to take your written statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Good.
Yeah, this is what we wanted.
This is exactly what we wanted. I mean, because again, we have our quantifying things, and we think about things, but we need like the real life experience here, and we know that, our models are not exhaustive. As I said, they're models, right? There are certain things that we weren't able to capture, some qualitative things that we definitely are going to, when we begin to prioritize things and prioritize projects, there are elements, shall we say, like lighting, for example. That is, I'm sure if we really sent Nate out and Grant out in a car and tried to go along and see what areas are lit along roads, we could do it, but, again, we don't necessarily have the budget or time to do that, but it's an important factor, and we want to be able to reflect that in the prioritization scheme, or, as you point out, access to Market Basket. That's food. That's where people work. These are these sort of really key community things that may not get captured in some of those models that we need to know about. There are other sorts of things I'm trying to think of. We did mention the transitions here, and it's pretty stark, especially for those of us in the greater inside 128. Let's put it that way, or even those of us even further inside 128 who live in really urban areas. The fact that you can go from zipping along on a 2-lane highway at 50 miles an hour, where that's what the speed limit. Avenue.
Abbott Avenue. I came off 190, and it's a 90-degree turn into a stop sign.
Right.
Yes, the struggle is real.
Yeah, that there are these places, and we need to know about those sort of locations and thoughts of, you go from that into that, or even into the town centers. You're zipping along, and then all of a sudden the speed limit's down to 20 miles an hour, or the road's curvy, and that and there's limited sight lines there. Those are, at least in terms of the models that we've come up with, somewhat more qualitative, but we need to know that. Those are going to factor into our, if we know about it, we're going to put it in our prioritization scheme. We're going to give it consideration because it's important, and we don't want to leave it out. So the more knowledge we can accrue and accumulate, the better. So thank you again for this. This was good.
Can you go back to the slide with the support matrix versus spending factor?
This one.
That one?
Yes, that one. So you said in your summary that you now have a predictive model that we can use to evaluate projects. A couple questions. The predictive model is based on aggregated data of what's already happened. Does the model anticipate changes either to the environment, like the introduction of a bike lane, or changes to the inputs like a large development project? How do things that don't exist on the ground figure into the evaluation of prioritization of segments and intersections?
That is a perfect question for Joel, so I will let him answer that.
Always fun. I'll go ahead and be very frank and say we're at 1.0 with what you see here in terms of anticipatory or how do these results play out relative to alternative investment schemes. Definitely a 10.0 almost build. I will be honest and say I can't even fathom how to start to model that. I'm not saying it's not a good, worthwhile thing, but I think we're kind of, compared to the internet, probably in the mid-70s right now with where we are. I want to go there, but I do not yet know of anybody taking anyone there. So food for thought, but yeah, again, do want to be honest here.
I think, Joel, is it fair to say, from what you're looking at here, that the predictive model it's almost, forgive me, if you go to like a 25% design public hearing, right, and somebody from Mass DOT gets up and says, now we're forced to consider the no-build condition, right? If we just let things roll along the way they are, by 2035, conditions will be like this. The predictive model, it's a little like that. Joel, is that correct?
Don't really understand where you're going with that, Nate.
Well, I'm just suggesting that there's not really a method by which you could, right at this moment, say, change the predictive model, bake a bike lane in there. The predictive model would tell you, maybe I need a bike lane there, but it doesn't necessarily tell you, if I put a bike lane there, some other thing will happen. Is that accurate?
Correct. Like on an individual corridor, right, we could estimate what that safety impact of adding a bike lane would be. In one instance, I guess, where I was trying to be very forthcoming, I was looking at a series of investments, right, as a package, and scaling them to try to really predict what's going to do the most and look at 10 different sub-options of that. That's not really what this model is tooled to do. So sorry if I misunderstood your question, but at a technical level, I thought that's where you were going.
Good.
I'm satisfied. Your model is not, and that factor is not integrated into it.
Correct. But that's not to say that we can't include it and think about it, because I do know that the VZAC and even George at MRPC has brought up, okay, we have a whole bunch of warehouse areas that have been permitted across the region, not necessarily here in Fitchburg, but other things, right? They're not there now, but they've been permitted. Okay, how do we figure a way to measure those when we begin to evaluate? Because we know in terms of truck traffic and things like that, based on kind of the no build, and it's a real no build, they're not there yet. It may not be reflected, but we're going to need to consider that. We should consider that. It would, be irresponsible if we didn't consider how the region is projected to grow. Again, other sorts of factors. Again, as much as we want to rely on the high-risk network and the high-injury network, they're not the only tools that we're going to be using in terms of prioritization and project selection. So
yes, that's part of the next round of evaluation, and it will heavily on the input from the municipality.
Yep. Correct.
I have one other question, which
please, sure, go ahead.
I'm assuming that the program guidelines limit you to 5 years of data. And beginning, the first slide you showed us, I think, 10 years. And
right.
We focused and did a deep dive in the last 5 years. Because those 5 years captured 2 years, I can't remember from the first image, because that 5-year period captures 2 years of COVID, is it consistent with the 10-year data, or do you see a meaningful change in isolating 5 years from 10 years?
I think it's close, but you can definitely, if you want to go back to the 10-year slide, you can kind of see the little dip, but kind of the before, and then we're kind of seeing coming back out of it. It's kind of going back to the pre-COVID numbers. I'm not looking at it off my screen here, but we think it's relatively consistent, and kind of just, it's interesting to see how the impact. Yep, there it was.
That one, is that the one you wanted?
Yeah. So you can see, that right there, and there's so I didn't really get into this during the slide, but the top one is looking at all KSI crashes, the bottom is fatalities, so you can kind of see the pretty drastic dip in 2020 when kind of no one was on the road, no one was walking, but coming back out, but you can kind of see it kind of, so that dotted line right in the middle is the 10-year trend line, so it's relatively flat, so we're kind of seeing, even with that dip in 2020, it's kind of going back to what it was pre-COVID, and even I think on the top one, or I think it was on the next slide, one of them is actually slightly a positive trend line. It might have been the one before, but yeah. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I think, Greg, I know you've said this in other meetings, but the reason that there's a 10-year window and a 5-year window, we take the 5-year window because of sort of the long-term change of roadway facilities. So the 10-year is kind of retrospective to give us a good, nuanced, deep picture. But the 5-year is to say, okay, let's not be pretending that roadways are static over such a long period. 5 years gives us a more responsible, kind of snapshot and says, okay, what are the change? Signal timings change, street lights get knocked over or street lights get put up, yield signs turn to stop signs turn to yield signs. So the 5 years are trying to give us, an accurate picture. Is that, you've said that, right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, I didn't make that up.
Nope.
Please, ma'am.
I'm Liz Murphy, the Community Development Director for the City of Fitchburg.
And thank you for your help in getting this stuff out to people. We really appreciate all the work that you've done.
You're welcome. One of our prior speakers asked a question about condition of road, and so I want to go back to that. We saw your risk factors, and the condition of the roads wasn't a risk factor. I'm wondering if that was something that was considered, if there was any data to support whether or not the condition of the road and people weaving around potholes. That's really what we're talking about.
So that came up heavily in, and there are a number of factors that are like this. Mm-hmm. So abrupt transition between an urban and rural setting. Mm-hmm. Poor street lighting. Curvature of roadway, places with difficult sight lines. Mm-hmm. When I went through the survey, the whole thing about swerving and the potholes and, bicyclists trying to dodge a hole, sidewalks in poor condition, people coming out onto the street, that all came through loud and clear to us. Mm-hmm. What we've done is there are certain... these models that you see here tonight, a lot of them are based on data that is available either as GIS sets or census sets. Those pieces of information, those qualitative pieces of information that you've given to us or that people have flagged to us as important, there's no real good way to put these into the model. However, it doesn't mean they've gone away. So one of the reasons that you have two communications and public involvement people on this project, myself and Grant, is to capture all of that and to all of the good technical people probably have gotten a little queasy at me reminding them of these things. But what we've decided is that when we get down the road with this, you see what I did there? Should we have at some point in the future, let's say we have, right, money is finite. We have 2 projects in town, and all things about them are equal. But if I go do this one, I can deal with the fact that the sidewalk here looks like crap, or the sidewalk here is non-existent. And this one over here, well, the sidewalk here looks pretty good. Mm-hmm. Or this one over here, the street lights don't exist. This one over here already has street lights. So those qualitative factors, those are things that when we get to the level of an individual project, and you can say, okay, short of Grant and I pretending to be a Google car and driving every scrap of road, and I spent my entire tax refund this spring on suspension work in my car, so I feel your pain. But, short of doing that, until we're like, okay, there's 2 projects in Ashburnham. Go look at what they're like out there. Once we get to that level, then all of those little factors that you've told us that are important, that Grant and I have worked so hard to capture, then they're going to kick in.
Okay.
So none of that stuff gets thrown away. It's just we're not ready to use it yet.
Okay, great. Thank you.
But that data does exist because the city does have one of those vehicles that has gone and scanned all the roads.
So Fitchburg may have that, but remember, this is not just for Fitchburg, so I got to do all that. So while Fitchburg may have one of those pavement monitoring vehicles, and I know MassDOT has some of them, I don't know if they got one there, I don't know if they got one there, I don't know if they got one there. And if it's, maybe it's readily available, but we need to get this done because we want to make sure that we can get you folks the money to which you're supposed to, in theory, have access to do projects. So if we needed to say, okay, we'll wait until Petersham can go acquire a pavement monitoring vehicle and then drive it around every inch of the road, could take a while. So again, rather than try and jam it into the model, we take it as a qualitative factor. We don't throw it away, but there'll be, when the final report comes out, you'll be able to see there'll be a whole list of, hey, these things were not baked. And we had a long conversation about this in August and September with MRPC, the VSAC, saying these are things that don't readily lend themselves to being put into this, but we'll use them at a later date. So I want to underscore it. I'll be gauche. $3,900 worth of Volvo suspension. Ugly. Didn't enjoy it one bit. I had other things planned. So I understand how bad this feels. And I saw it in the survey over and over and over again. So it's not lost on me. I promise you. And it's not lost on these people because I keep telling them about it. So just because it's not in this, when we come back to you, we'll talk about it more. And when we come back to you again and we really start drilling down on individual projects, maybe it'll get to that level, but it won't be lost. Promise.
So, full disclosure, Fitchburg just got an SS4A award.
Good. Yes.
So there could be an opportunity to focus a
Yes.
little bit more on the street conditions.
Yeah.
Fitchburg's version. But we'll also be doing an ADA transition plan as part of what we're doing. And, obviously we're doing something on a much smaller scale than what you're doing. We want to make sure that we are communicating with you on an ongoing basis so that we're not duplicating what you guys are really just separate this thing. But
Well, that actually
play nice together.
Well, that actually would be part of the next phase, because when we get down, within the next maybe 2 or 3 months, we will be going to individual municipalities and saying, hey, based on everything that we've looked at, this seems like maybe might be your list of projects. What do you think about these? And so if you were to come to me and say, well, guess what? Meadowbrook's already going to be completely full-depth reconstruction. Go look somewhere else. Then we don't double up. And standing here, I did not say that it would be. That was a for instance. I am not trying to shoehorn the good city of Fitchburg into doing anything that it's not 110% ready to do. I don't want to get haunted by Grandma Phyllis tonight. Please, ma'am, please.
So I was wondering about what your intent is with the public involvement. Like, first of all, this is a very dense information.
Yeah, come on down to the microphone, ma'am. I think
That's Dan in the audio booth. Dan in the TV.
All right, sorry. I guess I'm trying to better understand what the intent of the public involvement is and how we can get good public involvement. I have a planning background, and this is really dense stuff for me. Like, I feel like I need to go read this report and listen to this all again. And I'm not, I'm just not anybody on the street. I've had some background in this.
Good.
So I guess, like the average Joe, how are they going to access what you presented tonight? Is there a simpler 5 or 10 minute description that could describe for people what it is you're doing and what input you're looking for from the communities, from people individually. Then I think also related to that, how individual people can best work with their communities, like who in the communities are you going to go to? Is it going to be the selectmen? Is it going to be the Department of Public Works? I guess that sort of user guide, if you want to make this really people-centered, we have to think about that, and we have to think about doing it in languages other than English as well. Yes. So I just want to bring that up. The other thing I wanted to, like a nitty-gritty thing, like when you talk about car ownership, that's we find in our region that a lot of the car ownership, they say, yeah, we own a car, but they have a car, they might even have 2 cars, but sometimes maybe one of them works, or one of them needs work, and one of them is, they don't have the money to put on, So I guess that's the other thing, is how is that data reflected, like the real life on the ground data reflected? So those are 2 different questions, but those are my things.
Yeah, so I'll take a shot at those, and then I'll offer Joel to put a finer point on it. So as the guy who concocted the public outreach, I appreciate every comment that you've made. We have a project website which is available, it's a dedicated page of MRPC. Certainly this will go up on the project website. It will be made, before it goes up, it'll be made accessible for people who use assistive technologies. So if you're low vision, no vision, and it's read to you, it won't just come up as warning, empty page. That website has got information about, how to engage. If you go to that website, you can see the presentation from May, and you can see the 50-plus locations where we went out and did staffed tables and visibilities all across this region. I mean, it looked like chicken pox. Flagging people down, at the library, at the senior center, at the grocery store when they were there, taking one of the fact sheets that we have out front, which we did provide in other languages, primarily Spanish, saying, hey, this is what this is. We want to talk to you about this. We want your input on it. We don't want to do this in a vacuum. Because that's, really what, if we do it in a vacuum, then it's just a cookie-cutter plan, and it doesn't do it for you. So that's important to me. In terms of the whole thing about, yes, we own a car. Technically, it's registered in my name, but it's up on blocks, and it hasn't run in 2 years. I think, and I'm going to defer to Joel on this one, but because we took that from the census, it's how people choose to fill that question out. If somebody wants to say that, it's transit dependent, but if somebody wants to define themselves as not transit dependent because they have a car that hasn't run in 2 years and needs, $4,500 worth of work, and they've only got $600 in the bank, I don't know if that's necessarily going to pick somebody up. But for any of these for anything that comes from the census, we're in part dependent on the truthfulness of the person who's checking the box. So you have a background in planning yourself. You understand that there's always that kind of limitation at the end, and you hope that people aren't. You hope that they're not necessarily leaning into their pride so much that they're not kind of confessing that they could use some help when they're trying to say, well, yeah, that's a car. Well, no, it's a paperweight right now. So it's hard.
One car,
yeah.
5 people trying to use it.
Hey, I've lived in that house too. Joel, did I get that right, or did I overstep? I know you're online, so I'm trying to cover for you as much as I can.
No overstepping. I think you did a solid one. To just nerd out at a census level, I believe the way the question is worded is like working vehicles in your household. So if somebody answers 0, that could mean like 1 or 2 are on blocks, but from their definition are like going kind of to the hardship piece of, I would really like to make it usable, but I magically need to find $2,500 on my house, right? They theoretically would have answered 0 or like accurately reflected whether or not they were going to consider themselves as transit dependent or more predisposed to walking, biking, etc. But yeah, to clarify, I think it is inherently based on more than not somebody's paying attention to the question being asked, but should be accounted for in the question itself.
Yeah, you hope that nobody puts a carrot in there and puts working on it vehicle, right? You don't want that.
Indeed.
You need a very careful census taker to spot that.
And what was the part about how you plan to go out to the communities? Who in the community should people be in conversation with if they want to be part of this?
Yeah, so I think that, we do rely in part on our VSAC membership. One of the things that, and I'm sure you've composed the working group yourself more than once, but one of the things that I did when I put the VSAC together was to kind of send people like a list of, like, hey, you're not getting to be on a committee just to say that you're on a committee. That we expect a certain amount of make yourself visible in the community, help people understand what this is, be an ambassador for it, because it is a big region. And, for all of Grant's dedication, he doesn't live in those communities. He's not standing in line at the grocery store every Saturday able to turn around and say, hey, you know what I'm on? I'm on the VSAC. And that is a thing that we do remind them of periodically. Not that we think any of them aren't doing what they're supposed to do, it's just that life is busy. But in terms of promoting this meeting, I think the VSAC membership were told at least 3 times. I think the first time they were, told about it with the save the date was in early September. This date was picked based on a survey of municipal calendars to try to avoid overlapping with other things that people want to go to, school committees, town council budgetings, just events, things like that. In particular, there's a health, a regional, health event that happens next week, which knocks some of our VSAC membership who are first responders out. So we specifically dropped this in here very strategically right here, not on Halloween. We figured that'd be a non-starter. But we do rely on our VSAC membership to help us with that. And I think, the good people at MRPC and my own colleagues have probably gotten sick of me saying this as well. This is still kind of abstract, right? You felt it yourself. We're at a high level, and we're at a geography that I think most people don't think in, right? You know your town, you know your city, if you're good, your county, your state, but not many people know their MPO. And this is kind of more safety good still. I think when we get down to the level of individual projects, it'll be a little bit easier for people to kind of wrap their head around it, and it'll be a little bit easier for VSAC members to discuss it and say, come down and talk about this individual project. In addition, I think, as I mentioned, when we get to that kind of project level, we will be talking to the individual municipalities, and I think that will help, again, disperse the word. But I don't know just how many hours Grant and I put to it, but I would say that a good maybe quarter to third of our working weeks since about Labor Day has been in some form or another involved with publicizing this. And, again, 35,000 Enterprise or Sentinel Enterprise subscribers got an email about this about a week ago, served up direct to their inbox. So we've made every effort not to hide our light under a bushel.
Can I also add in one thing?
You're the project manager. I've just been stuck here.
Yeah, well, no.
I'm like that.
One of the things to kind of remember here, and this kind of goes towards your, again, public involvement and kind of thinking about this, is we've committed in our scope to MRPC to be thinking regionally, which is tough. We're committed to, recommending at least 2 projects per municipality in addition to the top 25, okay? So there could be a whole big cluster, as you might imagine, in places like Gardner and Fitchburg, but everybody is getting it. We're going to try to, again, engage all the communities in every municipality and how we get at this to ensure that every community gets some. And again, as you might have when you look at this, and if you overlay that high-risk network, there were several communities that didn't have anything in that predictive model, right? But that's not good because they still have problems. We see right here that you've got problems in Petersham, okay? Like, we have to figure a way to rectify that. We have to recommend. How did that happen? You do not know. We have to figure a way to rectify that. Those places aren't going to be left out just because of the sense of a model. It's a model. Like, that's always the thing to remember. Models aren't perfect. We're using them to kind of get at the problem. We've quantified it in a certain way, but again, we need to get real experience on this from folks who live here to kind of help us refine. We're kind of, as you like to say, Nate, like, we're up at this level and it's abstract, and we kind of want to keep honing down into, something manageable, because ultimately we come up with our project lists and move to the next sort of set of, funding recommendations and how we go about it. We've got to be pretty precise and say, okay, here are these countermeasures. Here's why they work in these locations. And, we're, and as well as the feds are going to say, well, why are they all, well, we're not going to do this, but they might say, for some applicants, why are they all in one town? You're an MPO. And as we said, we're committed to, again, at least 2 in every town and 25 overall in terms of kind of getting this. So I just kind of wanted to reiterate that. And that means a lot of engagement with these 2 folks right there and the rest of us, and hitting up municipalities and saying, hey, have you spoken to your, constituents? What's out there? What are your problems? Here's what we've identified. Is this right? Do you think this is the right way to approach the problem? I mean, we're not there yet. Again, we're trying to figure out how to prioritize and kind of move down in terms of geography. That's what we'll be busy with the next couple of months. So.
It's great to see. Thank you for all the work.
Oh, thanks, Carolyn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well needed.
Is that it?
I think, yeah, we're good. Everybody take a big double heaping scoop of candy. Don't make me take it all back to Mark.
Yes, thank you very much. We really, really appreciate having folks come out and all the really good feedback. So, this was really good. Thanks again.
Yeah, what we needed.
All right, thanks. No, this was good. Thank you.
Passed. Salem comment. If you're feeling burnt out on museums and witchcraft, spend some time wandering or playing in Salem's